January of 2026, the new prices will go into effect. But we're not stopping there. Next year, Medicare will select more drugs for negotiations so more Americans get more savings on life-saving medications they need and deserve.
President Biden at an event earlier on lowering health care costs, specifically drug prices. For more, we bring in our political panel. Maura Gillespie is back with us, founder of Blue Stack Strategies, alongside Kevin Walling, Democratic strategist at HG Creative Media, former Biden campaign surrogate. So, Kevin, this is a good moment. I think we can agree for this White House. The question is, can the president translate that into approval ratings and the polling numbers? Can he connect with voters on this? Because this appears to have broad bipartisan support.
Well, Joe, that's the real question. And it's not just about the price of drugs, of course, but all the issues with inflation and wages and stuff like that. Yeah. It seems like there is a disconnect between the American people and their standing in the country and how they feel about things with some of the great policy rollouts that this administration has been touting. I mean, this is going to be a huge deal for the first time that the government can actually negotiate down the cost of Medicare, saving taxpayers upwards of $200 billion over the next 10 years, rather. And the fact that these are household drugs that people take all the time for cancer treatment, for diabetes treatment. This is going to make a difference for a lot of Americans. We just got to make sure we get the message out.
Mm-hmm. Well, the issue the Biden campaign facing is that overall approval rating is actually higher, 42%, but when it comes to the economy, it's at 36%. So he's really not gaining traction because people are still feeling inflation more. But lessering drug prices, especially for seniors, that's something very difficult for Republicans to really go after the administration, isn't it?
It is. I think, we have to remember that for better or for worse, the American people have a short-term memory when it comes to things that happen in politics or just things that are happening. And unfortunately, this won't hit people's wallets until 2026. So you do have to be cognizant of that. And Republicans will probably largely ignore it in a campaign sense. While it does have bipartisan support, I agree, it won't really impact the voters directly until 2 years later from now. And at that point, you could have a Republican president, so who will actually get credit for it, right? So you have to think about those things, unfortunately, the short term.
So you don't see it as a factor on this campaign, all the more reason to crystallize the messaging around this, Kevin. We were talking earlier, Anne-Marie, about a Kaiser poll that found 77% of Republicans actually support this. So when you're sitting down in the press office, the communications office, how do you make it work?
Well, again, I think touting this out in the grassroots, making sure, I think this White House does a great job of capturing regional press when the president goes to town, whether it be a groundbreaking, whether it be a ribbon cutting. So I think going local, right? Highlighting this is, as he said, I don't think he used the language like he did before with Obamacare, but this is a big FD for seniors and for young people that struggle with chronic conditions and things like that. But again, I think, I'd love to have his name tied to every Medicaid bill or Medicare bill that people see with that discount, just like we're putting his name on a lot of those signs out there for groundbreakings and ribbon cuttings out there with the infrastructure bill.
I saw an advertisement recently, and it was about the Inflation Reduction Act.
Yeah.
Potentially with lowering drug costs, will it finally hit home that this is part of that act? Because remember that poll that only 7 in 10 Americans only 3 in 10 Americans knew what it was. It was 7 in 10 that had no idea what the IRA was. Yeah,
and again, to Mara's point, the American people move on so quickly, and I think this was actually one of the failures of the Obama years as well, where they were doing a lot of work, but we're not shaping that in terms of people's mentality and just going on to the next issue or the next fight in Congress, the next funding cycle and stuff like that, without actually doing the real work to drive home that message. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that, at least in the next 13 months before the election.
The knock on this, by the way, if you can find another side of this, is where's the money going to go for R&D and for innovation? And that's what we're hearing from the big pharma companies. Will Republicans echo that as well?
They've got a lot to tackle coming up in September and this fall, right? We only have so many weeks left of the session, and they have a lot to handle in terms of spending and in terms of supplemental that we now are having with the hurricanes and what happened in Lahaina, Maui. Mm-hmm. So you really do have to think about, okay, how much can they get done? They're already talking about a government shutdown. So you're already up against a timeline of session, but also how far are you willing to push some of these Republican members who have said that they will not spend beyond a certain number. So it's going to be a struggle, I think, not only with this, but moving on for the rest of the session.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be difficult. All right, we're going to talk about the rest of the session next. Coming up, the House's second highest ranking Republican leader, Steve Scalise, has been diagnosed with a rare blood cancer. We're back with our political panel after the break. From Washington, this is Balance of Power. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV. The House's second-ranking Republican leader, Steve Scalise, has been diagnosed with a rare blood cancer, has begun treatment that will last, quote, several months, he said in a statement earlier today. For more, let's bring in our political panel, Maura Gillespie and Kevin Walling. Maura, let's start with you. How does this change? And first off, obviously, our well wishes to Congressman Scalise, and I think everyone's hoping for a speedy recovery. But how does this change the dynamics on the Hill, especially for Speaker McCarthy?
He'll have to engage more with Republicans, especially those in the farther right of the party and of the conference, and really pick up where, again, Steve Scalise, we wish him well, and I love that McCarthy called him the legend of Louisiana. I thought that was a great, little touch there, because he has been through so much and continues to persevere. And as the Majority Leader has said, he's going to continue to push through and fight and, be there in Washington as much as possible as he takes on these treatments. But Kevin and the other members of the leadership will have to pick up, where Scalise really is a strong voice for different parts of the party, obviously those in the farther right, to get them to come along to what the leadership is looking to do. So it will be certainly an interesting aspect for McCarthy and some others in leadership like Stefanik and others to step up and help out.
This wouldn't be his first time coming back. As we remember his recovery from being shot at the ball game in 2017. This is a tough individual we're talking about here, but Kevin, these treatments can make life very difficult and make work very difficult. Does the Speaker need to plan around this as we talk about a very difficult debate on government spending that could lead to a shutdown?
Yeah, Joe, it's a really good question. And to Mara's point before the break, Congress has their work cut out for them when they come back on September 12th. You have so many of those bills must passes by the 30th. The dynamics are playing out within that caucus. Mara said it earlier. You have a lot of folks that have already staked out ground that they will not go along with X number of dollars past some of this stuff. So I think we'll see how the treatment plays out. From all accounts, they've caught it early. It's a very treatable, in recent years, has become much more treatable in terms of this kind of blood cancer. But again, speaking as a Democrat, I don't count out Steve Scalise on anything. He is a strong fighter. We always have a great year in, year out at D.C. Mardi Gras. He's always the center of attention there, leading the floats and stuff like that. So he is a real character, and he's one of those characters in Congress that we need more of, I think.
But in some ways, it does make the administration's job much harder. As Moore says, he's the outreach to the far right. What Speaker McCarthy is talking about, a potential impeachment inquiry, that is really to satisfy the hard right and potentially maybe so they sign up for government spending that the Biden administration and the Democrats and the Republicans, many moderate Republicans, want to see get through.
Yeah.
So it's going to be difficult for them as well.
It's a totally difficult dance that you're seeing play out. And you saw Kevin McCarthy kind of inch towards this impeachment inquiry, and then you have all these 18 members in these Biden districts that are like, heck no, we're not doing that. You got to pull back the reins. And to your point, he did dangle some of that in terms of the investigative arm of Congress in order to bring folks along with the spending, the must-pass operations of Congress. But again, I'd like to see how the treatment plays out for Steve Scalise. He's got McCarthy's got a strong leadership team from kind of all aspects of the caucus. Tom Elmer in that dynamic as well. So we'll see how that process plays out.
I'll add this: Dianne Feinstein, Mitch McConnell, John Fetterman. We've talked a lot about health issues among elected officials over these past months, not just the age of those running, but the health issues that remind us of how closely divided this Congress is.
But also how taxing, this job is not easy. What members of Congress go through is not an easy
So if you lose one vote, though, it means something.
It does. It has an impact. And obviously we saw it with Dianne Feinstein. Truly, if you want to highlight something where things were held up because of her absence. I think with Steve Scalise, we have seen he is a fighter. He has persevered over things, as you mentioned, his gunshot. And I have high hopes and confidence that he will be around and active and an integral part of what leadership produces this year.
Yeah. And he's only 57,
exactly,
too, which is young compared to some of the folks that you just listed, too.
Right.
Absolutely right.
No, certainly. It's just it's
taxing.
taxing. We obviously wish him well, but
Yep.
the agenda coming up just in Congress,
It's really robust, absolutely.
It's really the calm before the storm.
Absolutely. We remind ourselves not only of this debate over spending here, the possibility of a shutdown. We're talking about the
Natural
resumption of
disasters.
student loan debt payments, natural disasters. The month of September could be something, Anne-Marie. We'll go through it together. Many thanks to our panel, Maura Gillespie and Kevin Walling. Check out the Washington Edition newsletter on the terminal and online.
Thanks for joining us on Balance of Power. This is